She stepped off the train clutching a small, scuffed suitcase and a paper rolled tightly in her hand. The marriage contract. Her name was Mabel, 32, once married but never a mother. The moment her boots touched the dusty platform, whispers rose like smoke from the townspeople gathered nearby. That's her, the barren one. Why would he even bother? She'll never carry his name properly. Mabel's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Her cheeks flushed with shame, not from the words, she'd heard them before, but from the fact they still stung. The rancher who had arranged the match was nowhere in sight. She stood alone under the hot mid-morning sun, swaying just slightly, her train bonnet barely hiding the sorrow in her eyes. A boy with sticky fingers offered to carry her bag. She declined with a soft smile and sat quietly on the station bench, watching each wagon pass by, hoping one would stop. They didn't. At the far end of the town, 3 ranch wives stood in a knot, pretending not to stare. She'll never last a season, one scoffed. Men only want one thing, and she can't give it. Mabel swallowed hard and looked at the contract again, now smudged with sweat and dust. Time passed. Hours. The conductor offered her a place to rest back on the train. She declined again. She hadn't traveled all this way to be turned around by silence. Just as the final wagon was about to leave town, a slow clop of hooves echoed down the street. A broad-shouldered man rode up, dismounted, and stood staring at her with quiet eyes. His name was Eli Carter, widowed, 36, father of 2 sons. "I'm late," he said gruffly, "but not sorry." She blinked. "You got my letter?" He nodded, then looked around at the whispering townsfolk, the judgment thick as smoke. He turned to her, extended his hand, and in a voice loud enough for every bystander to hear, said, "They mock what they don't understand. You don't need to bear children to be a mother. I've got 2 who need raising, if you'll have us." Mabel's breath caught, not because of his words, but because for the first time in years someone had looked at her and seen more than what she could not give. She stood up slowly, placed her hand in his, and the whispers fell away. All that remained was the beginning of something she'd never expected. Home. The wagon ride to Eli's ranch was long, but not awkward. Mabel didn't speak much, nor did Eli, but somehow the silence between them felt honest, not hollow. As they rolled over hills dotted with dry grass and early spring flowers, she kept glancing at him, searching for signs of pity or regret. She found none. His hands were calloused, reins held firm, yet his posture had a stillness to it that didn't feel cold. "You really mean it?" she finally asked, almost afraid of the answer. Eli kept his eyes on the trail. "I don't say what I don't mean." Then, softer. "My boys need someone steady. Not just kind. They've had kind. They need strong. You got here alone. That tells me enough." When they arrived, the ranch looked worn but not broken, much like Mabel. The house was small, one porch post leaning, the roof patched with different shades of wood. 2 boys, maybe 5 and 7, peeked from behind the curtain but didn't run out. Mabel's heart pinched. "They're shy," Eli said, dismounting. "Been through a lot. Their ma passed 2 winters ago. I ain't done everything right since." She nodded. "Neither have I." Inside, the home smelled of cedar and dust. A single table, 3 chairs, and a cracked cup on the windowsill greeted her like old ghosts. Mabel didn't unpack right away. She stood in the kitchen, then the bedroom, breathing it all in, both the quiet grief and the unspoken welcome. The boys remained hidden upstairs until dinner. She heard Eli coaxing them, then the soft pad of small feet descending. The older one, Samuel, was skeptical. The younger, Thomas, clung to a blanket and stared with wide, uncertain eyes. Mabel didn't try too hard. She simply placed cornbread and stew on the table, sat down, and let them choose. Eventually, the scent of food won them over. As they chewed, Samuel asked, "Are you going to leave too?" Mabel's throat tightened. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I didn't come all this way to leave." The room fell into a hush heavier than words. Eli didn't interrupt. He watched, listened, and saw something shift, a breath taken, a wall lowered. That night, after the boys had gone to sleep, Mabel stood by the window, staring at the moonlit hills. Eli joined her, offering a blanket. "They'll come around," he said. "I'm not worried," she replied. "Some things take root slow, but they grow strong." In the reflection of the glass, they looked like a family already, unfinished, but undeniably forming. The sun was barely up when Mabel rose to the creak of the wooden floor beneath her bare feet. She had hardly slept. Part nerves, part unfamiliar bed. But her body moved with a quiet purpose. In the tiny mirror above the basin, her reflection looked different. Not younger, not softer, but steadier. She tied her hair back and stepped into the main room, where the fire had gone cold. With practiced hands, she relit the stove, warmed yesterday's biscuits, and set to boiling water for coffee. She didn't notice Samuel watching from the stairs until he cleared his throat. "Pa said you'd be gone before breakfast," he muttered. Mabel turned, surprised, but not hurt. "Did he now?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "Well, looks like I'm still here. You hungry?" He nodded, slowly. "Can I help?" "You ever make eggs?" "Once. I dropped 'em." She smiled and handed him a fresh one from the basket. "Try again. Kitchen's the only place it's okay to break things. At least once." His laugh was small but real. As Samuel cracked the egg, clumsily but carefully, Mabel turned to find Thomas at the table, clutching his blanket and blinking sleepily. She poured him warm milk without asking. "You like it sweet?" Thomas nodded. She added honey. When Eli came in from the barn an hour later, the smell of breakfast and the sound of quiet conversation met him at the door. He paused, surprised, not just at the food, but at the softness in his sons' voices. Mabel handed him a plate like she'd been doing it for years. "Hope you don't mind. I let them help." "Don't mind at all." They ate together at the creaky table, 4 souls who had all been unwanted or left behind in one way or another. Afterward, Mabel rinsed the dishes while the boys ran outside. Eli lingered by the door. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to." He nodded slowly. "They've never called anyone Ma since their mother passed." Mabel dried her hands. "They don't need to, not yet. But if someday they do, I'll be here to hear it." Eli looked at her then. Really looked. Not as a solution or a hired hand, as someone who'd already started to stitch herself into the seams of their life. That afternoon, she found a chair outside and watched the boys chase each other through the wild grass. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself hope. Not for a miracle, but for a second chance that felt just as rare. The wind picked up that evening, carrying with it the scent of hay and something sweeter. Change. After supper, the boys scattered into the fields again, while Eli lingered to help Mabel clear the table. She moved around him with ease now, their steps finding rhythm in silence. But as she reached for the drawer to put away the linen, she caught sight of a cedar chest tucked beneath the stairs. It wasn't hers, but it called to her. "You can open it," Eli said quietly, following her gaze. "It belonged to her." Mabel hesitated. "Your wife?" He nodded. "I haven't touched it since. The boys never go near it." She knelt slowly, lifting the lid as if unsealing a ghost. Inside lay neatly folded fabric, yellowed lace, and the faintest smell of lavender. Atop everything was a dress, cream cotton with faded blue stitching. Simple. Beautiful. Loved. She wore that the day we brought Thomas home, Eli said softly, and again on Samuel's first birthday. Mabel ran her fingers across the hem. You kept it clean all this time. Couldn't throw it out. Couldn't face it either. You loved her. I did. His voice cracked, but he didn't flinch. And when she passed, I didn't think I'd ever let someone in again. Not like that. Mabel closed the lid with reverence. I'm not asking for her place. I know, but you've already taken your own. Outside, the boys' laughter cut through the hush like birdsong. Eli reached into the drawer beside the chest and pulled out a small tin. She made this too, he said, offering Mabel a brooch carved from bone. It was supposed to go on that dress, but she never wore it with it. I think maybe it was waiting for someone else. Mabel blinked hard. Why are you giving me this? Because they mocked you, he said, for not being able to give life. But they never saw what I do. You don't need to bear children to be a mother. You're already teaching them how to feel safe again. She took the brooch with trembling fingers and pinned it to her dress. It didn't match. But it belonged. That night, while the wind howled through the plains and the boys slept with dreams full of warmth, Mabel sat by the window, the brooch heavy on her chest. It wasn't a title, it wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning, and this time, it was hers. When Eli returned from the barn the next morning, he found Mabel sitting at the kitchen table with all three boys, quills in hand, brows furrowed, scraps of parchment spread like a battlefield. What's going on here? He asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Multiplication, Mabel answered, lips curled with quiet triumph. And Thomas is winning. The oldest boy grinned, teeth crooked but proud. She said I'm sharper than a flint rock. You are, Mabel replied, tapping his paper. Even if your twos look like tired swans. Eli chuckled. Didn't know we'd hired a school marm. You didn't, Mabel said, her tone softer now. I just always wanted to be one. She hesitated, looking out the window where the sun poured over the prairie like honey. Back where I'm from, they said I wasn't cut for it. Not pretty enough. Not married. And, well, you know. Eli nodded. He did know. Word traveled like wind. Funny, he said. Here, you're all those things they said you'd never be. Even the pretty part. She looked away, cheeks coloring, but she didn't argue. After lessons, the boys scattered into the fields, chasing frogs and daring each other across creek stones. Mabel lingered in the doorway, hands still smudged with chalk. Do you think they'll always need me? She asked. Eli leaned beside her, arms folded. I think you're already the one they run to first. Even though I didn't give birth to them? He turned toward her fully. Especially because you didn't have to. You chose them. She looked at him, startled. No one had said that to her before, not even herself. Most women bear children because it's expected, he went on. You mothered them because your heart told you to. That's rarer than any cradle. Mabel's throat tightened. You make it sound holy. It is. They stood like that a long while, shoulder to shoulder, the late summer air thick with bee song and truth. She wanted to say something more, something perfect, but Eli beat her to it. There's a plot of land behind the barn, he said. Flat and dry, if you want to build a schoolhouse, something real with books and benches and a bell. I'll clear the land for you. Her breath caught. You'd do that? You're already teaching them under this roof. Why not give them a roof of their own?" For the first time in years, Mabel felt like the world might finally be big enough for the dreams she had tucked away. And this time, no one was calling her barren. They were calling her brave. The foundation took days, the beams longer, but Eli never once complained. He worked in silence with sawdust in his hair and resolve in his hands, while Mabel drafted lessons and stitched curtains out of old feed sacks. The boys helped where they could, stacking stones, smoothing dirt, arguing over which one got to ring the bell first. When the schoolhouse finally stood, simple and square with a door that creaked like a secret, the whole ranch paused to stare. Mabel placed a bell on a crooked wooden beam above the entrance. Small, rusted, but clear when it rang. On the first morning, she wore her only blue dress and tied her hair back with the same ribbon her sister had once thrown at her feet. She stood by the door as her 3 boys, hers in every way that mattered, rushed up the steps with slates and wide grins. "You nervous?" Eli asked, leaning on the fence. "Terrified," Mabel whispered, "but not about the teaching, about believing this is real." Eli walked over slowly, his boots sinking into the warm morning dust. "It's real, because you made it real." The bell rang sharp and proud. She hadn't even touched it. Eli had. "I thought you'd want to be the first," he said, "to ring it for yourself." Her eyes stung. "I'd rather remember the sound it makes when someone believes in me." That night, after the boys had gone to bed with heads full of letters and numbers, Mabel sat with Eli on the porch. They watched the moonlight spill over the roof of her schoolhouse. "They still talk," she said softly. "The townsfolk. About me, about why I can't bear children." Eli nodded slowly. "Let them talk." "Does it ever bother you," she asked, voice breaking, "that I can't give you—" "You gave me a reason to build again," he interrupted. "You gave those boys laughter, and you gave this land a bell that rings louder than gossip ever will. Who told you bearing children was the only way to make life?" She turned to him. "Everyone." Then everyone was wrong. He took her hand and pressed it to his chest. "You gave me more family than I ever had in my bloodline?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. But when she leaned her head on his shoulder and listened to the wind carry the echo of that little bell, she knew that what they'd built wasn't just a schoolhouse. It was a monument to every woman who had ever been told she was less, when in truth she was everything. It came folded in a brown envelope, slipped between bills and a seed catalog, the kind of paper that smelled like damp regret. Mabel almost missed it, would have tossed it aside with the others, until she saw the handwriting. Sharp, familiar. Her sister's. The last time they'd spoken was the day Mabel had been dragged from the house like an unwelcome shadow. Now, years later, a single sheet held what the past never could. "Mother's gone," it began. No greeting, no warmth, just the brittle truth. Mabel sat down slowly, fingers trembling. Eli watched from the porch, his hammer paused mid-air. "Bad news?" he asked gently. "Old news," she whispered, "but it finally reached me." The letter went on to explain that their mother had passed in her sleep. No illness, no pain, just silence. "She never stopped blaming you," her sister wrote. "Said you brought shame for not carrying forward the family name. I tried to make her see, but she never did. Still, she asked for you at the end." Mabel folded the letter once, then again, until it vanished into her palm. Eli set the hammer down and crossed the yard without a word. "She hated me," Mabel said flatly, "and yet she asked for me. Why do people wait until their voices are fading to say what mattered?" Eli crouched beside her. "Because they think time is a promise, You knew better. You built what they said you never could. Love without permission. Family without blood. Mabel looked toward the schoolhouse, now glowing gold in the late sun. Inside, her boys were practicing their alphabet, laughing over chalk dust and crooked lines. "Do you think I should go?" she asked, the question fragile as frost. Eli didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Only if you need to. But don't go looking for peace in the ashes. It's already here, in what you've built, in who you are." That night, she burned the letter in the fireplace, not out of spite, out of release. She watched the paper curl, blacken, and disappear, taking with it years of trying to be someone else's definition of a woman. Then she stood, took a fresh page, and began writing. A letter. Not to her sister or her mother, but to herself. A vow. That the world might measure a woman by the children she bears, but Mabel would never let that be the measure of her worth again. Not with a bell that rang. Not with 3 boys upstairs. Not with a man who chose her, whole and broken both. The knock came just after dawn. Eli was still loading hay, Mabel buttering bread for the boys' breakfast. She opened the door with half a mind to scold whoever dared wake the house so early, but her words died at the sight. A boy, no more than 7, stood on the porch, barefoot, coat too large, holding a tattered note pinned to his sleeve. He didn't speak, just looked up with hollow eyes that had seen too much. Mabel crouched, heart stumbling. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Are you hungry?" A nod. She reached for his hand, cold as river stone, and led him inside. The boys fell silent. Spoons paused mid-air. Mabel sat the child down gently, poured him a bowl, and read the note while he ate. One line, scrawled in panicked ink. "His name is Jesse. I can't keep him. But you'll know what to do." No signature, no return address, just desperation folded in paper. Eli read over her shoulder, jaw tight. "Another woman cast out?" he murmured. Mabel said nothing. Just watched Jesse sip milk like it was rain after drought. She didn't ask questions, didn't need to. She saw it in the way he flinched at loud sounds, how he clutched his spoon like it might vanish. The world had taught him not to trust permanence. By nightfall, Jesse was still silent, but he hadn't tried to run. Mabel bathed him, wrapped him in one of the boys' old shirts, and tucked him into a cot by the fireplace. As she turned to leave, a whisper tugged her back. "Will I have to leave too?" Her breath caught. She knelt beside him, brushing damp hair from his brow. "No," she said. "You're already home." Jesse blinked, tears welling, then closed his eyes with a kind of faith that broke her. Upstairs, Eli stood at the landing, watching. "You didn't hesitate," he said softly. "Neither did you when you took me," she replied. "I was broken too, just quieter about it." That night, while Jesse slept in the glow of embers, Mabel lay awake beside Eli. "They said I'd never be a mother," she whispered. "But every time someone unloved walks through our door, I feel it. I'm meant to be this. For them." Eli held her tighter. "You were always meant to be more than what they said." And outside, the first snowflakes fell, covering the porch, the tracks, and every place she'd once been left behind. Spring didn't arrive with blossoms. It arrived with laughter. Jesse was the one who taught the house to sing again. Though quiet at first, he shadowed the older boys, learning chores, mimicking Eli's way of stacking firewood and even how to scowl when the wind blew too hard. Mabel watched him grow not just in height, but in trust. He started humming when he worked, offering to feed the chickens, asking questions like, "Why do eggs come out warm?" or "Do trees remember the snow?" Mabel answered each one with care, because no one had answered hers when she was little and aching. One morning, as she swept the front step, a woman from town stopped her with a smirk. "I see you've started your own little orphanage now. Guess some women just collect what they can't birth." The words struck like a slap, but Mabel didn't flinch. She simply smiled, calm as still water. "No," she said. "I'm building a family. The kind that doesn't care who gave blood, only who gives love." The woman scoffed and walked off. But Jesse had heard. He was hiding just around the side of the porch, frozen. When Mabel turned and saw his face, she dropped the broom. "She's wrong," she said, kneeling. "You are not less, and I am not broken. We were both just waiting for the right arms." Jesse nodded slowly, his small fingers finding hers. "I think God gave you my name on purpose," he whispered, "so you'd find me." That night, at the dinner table, Jesse called her Mama for the first time. No ceremony, no big moment, just a soft word between bites of stew. Every boy went still, even Eli. Mabel smiled without crying, but her spoon trembled in her hand. After the boys were tucked in, she sat with Eli by the hearth. "Do you remember when I first came?" she asked. "I do," he said. "You wouldn't look me in the eye. I thought no one would ever want me. And now?" She looked at the stairs, at the quiet sleeping above. "Now I know I was made to want them, and to be wanted, exactly like this." Eli kissed her hand. "Not a single one of them sees what you don't have. They only see what you give." And what she gave wasn't in her womb. It was in her arms, her voice, her unshakable belief that love could root even in barren places, and grow taller than anyone expected. The house never got quieter. It just changed its sound. Chickens clucked, boys argued over chores, someone always forgot to shut the barn gate. Eli's boots by the door, Mabel's humming while kneading dough, Jesse's laughter echoing off the rafters. It all wove into a music she'd never thought she'd hear. Her heart had once been empty, not from the absence of children, but from a world that measured worth in bloodlines. But now, every corner of their home bore proof that family was not made in the womb. It was made in the waiting, the choosing, the staying. On Jesse's 7th birthday, he was handed a carved wooden horse, handmade by Eli, with his initials burned into the side. Mabel baked a crooked cake, and the boys insisted on singing the song twice, loudly, off-key. "Make a wish," they all cried. Jesse closed his eyes, clutching the toy to his chest. "Already got it," he said. Mabel froze. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. That night, after the boys were asleep, Mabel sat with Eli under the stars, her shawl pulled tight. "Do you think they'll always need me?" she asked softly. Eli chuckled. "Need you? Mabel, you're the thread. Without you, this whole thing unravels." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Some days I still feel like the girl left at the tracks." "Then look around," he said. "Look at what that girl did." A week later, a woman knocked on their door. Tattered bonnet, arms tight around 2 scrawny children. She didn't speak at first, just stared at Mabel with hollow eyes. "I heard what you do," she finally said. "I don't want them to forget what it feels like to be safe." Mabel didn't ask who she was, or what had happened. She stepped aside, opened the door wider. "Then you came to the right place." That night, the table stretched farther. Jesse scooted over, sharing space like he'd done it 100 times. The new children didn't smile yet, but Mabel knew. In time, they would. Because the woman the town once mocked as barren had become the valley's quiet answer to every child lost at the storm. They no longer whispered behind her back. They sent letters. They asked for advice. They told their daughters, "Be like her." And the woman who had once been left behind became the one who held everyone together, not because she birthed a legacy, but because she built one, with hands that never stopped reaching, and a heart that never stopped making room. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories here on Stories Left Behind. If you were the cowboy standing in that crowd, would you have spoken up too? Tell us below.